would you like to talk about today?
Well, a number of things on my mind. First of all, I'd like to commend you and your work. Obviously, the proclamation is important. All journalists deserve a great deal of credit for the work that they do to shine light on political debates that we're having, and especially in this day and age, it's critically important to do that. And you have a long and distinguished career in journalism with the Star Beacon and other ventures, and just feel it's important that we affirm the role of a free and independent journalistic body, because it is part of our First Amendment rights that help preserve all the liberties that we hold so dear. That being said, I know you have thousands of followers, and I enjoy relating to them some of the issues that are bubbling to the top of the State House. Today is Monday, August 6th, and I want to bring you up to date. Friday morning, the governor signed a bill that I joint sponsored with Representative Sarah LaTourette of Chesterland, a bill with respect to school resource officers that we had been working on for, oh my goodness, a couple of years now. Basically what this bill does, it grandfathers, and first of all, it's all about school safety and school security. The bill grandfathers in those districts who are already using school resource officers, so they're not covered. They already have implemented their safeguards and such, but moving forward, if a school wishes to have a resource officer at their disposal, House Bill 318 outlines the responsibilities of that person, the training, and then it allows for a memorandum of understanding for the local school district to make those small corrections, nuances with respect to the local law enforcement body and the district to make that relationship work even better. In addition to providing, and this is the first legislation I'm told nationwide, this is a blueprint for other states to follow. In addition to outlining the training and responsibilities, it also includes money for funding that particular training. And we felt that was important to get these guys and gals up and running as soon as possible. In addition, this bill also provides a limited amount of funding for mental health training in terms of being sensitive for teachers and staff members alike to the needs of students, to make them more acutely aware of some of those triggers, if you will, that students might display, that hopefully with appropriate channeling those needs could be met, and the students would feel more part of the body after receiving professional health counseling. And one final note, in the Senate, an amendment was added. It was accepted by the House to address a growing issue we've had with expulsions in kindergarten through third grade. What the bill does is to promote a behavioral program for students so that they can be more suited to stay within the school for lesser offenses. Now, there are some things that you're still going to be expelled for, but we're looking at the numbers, and the numbers were growing. Some of these students come to school with a great deal of challenges, trauma in their lives, and the idea was to promote their continued presence in school, especially in those primary grades, knowing how important it is to meet grade level reading capabilities by third grade. If we don't have them up and ready by third grade, the gap between those who can read and those who can't grows, and education becomes an almost insurmountable mountain for them to climb. So all this contained in one bill, signed by the governor Friday. Very excited about this moving forward in terms of promoting safety and helping students to remain in school and dealing with some of the multifaceted challenges that they now face. It's difficult in today's world growing up as a kid, so very pleased with that. Another bill that I joined sponsored was passed recently. House Bill 643 dealt with water quality in the Lake Erie Western Basin. And I must say that there was a Senate version of this, and the Senate version is the one that was ultimately passed. Senators O'Brien from the 32nd District and Gardner from Western Ohio had the Senate version. Representative Arndt from Port Clinton and I had the House version. Bottom line is this: it's called the Lake Erie 2020 Clean Lake Plan. There's over $20 million allocated for the purchase of new equipment, field monitoring systems, fertilization machinery and such to inject fertilizer into the soil and not spread it on top of the soil. Money allocated for soil and water conservation district personnel so that we can do field testing more than routine basis, programming, so that it can be definitely more available to us in terms of research and study and to monitor potential runoff. It also, and this is what I was really excited about in the bill, provides over $10 million for research to address the issue of dredged material. What do we do with this material? Conneaut Harbor, Asheville Harbor, every few years we have to dredge to keep it open. Toledo, it's every year. Cleveland, Lorraine. Point of the matter is, this material already contains phosphorus, so what do we do with it? As opposed to what we have been doing, open lake dumping. We dig it up in one area, we dump in another area of the lake. So the idea is to figure out what we can do. Now, the silt in the western basin is a lot more fine, more sandy. It's more difficult to do things with, according to the preliminary research that's been done. Our end of the lake, Asheville and Conneaut, definitely there are some possibilities of being able to dry it out, clean it up, and use it for fill. Road projects, construction work, that sort of thing. The idea is if we can, using this research money, repurpose that dredged material and actually turn it into something that's profitable, then it solves two problems. We're not dumping in the lake, and we're repurposing the material that otherwise would have been for naught. So this is a first step. Now, within hours of signing this into law, the governor also asked Soil and Water to declare the Western Basin, actually, correct that, 8 sub-watersheds of the Western Lake Erie Basin. The governor asked that those be declared impaired. And as such, he could take measures that would mandate certain processes and certain government interventions, if you will, to help clean up the lake. Now, Soil and Water, to their credit, blocked that measure, wanted more time to study. Anytime there are government mandates on anything, it's always best to make sure we all know what we're getting into. So last week it was announced, and as ranking member on the Agricultural Committee, the House Ag, at the State Fair, when we had a meeting, both Ag committees, Senate and House, met at the fair, it was announced that there would be a study committee created for this fall. And I was asked to be on that study committee to look at some of the research in terms of phosphorus runoff, agricultural techniques and how they may be improved, edge of field research, all those sorts of things. So I'm deeply committed to a clean lake Erie because that impacts our lives and millions of others around the lake on an everyday basis. Without clean water, living and life as we know it would change radically. And there's more pressure, quite frankly, on Ohio agriculture. As we near 9 billion people on this planet by 2050, given limited space and more competition for that space, we are going to have to produce more in terms of agricultural output to feed an ever-burgeoning world population. So we're not going to get away from this issue, and I'm not one to duck issues. Let's figure out what the parameters are, what the challenges are, and find a way together that we can address those challenges. So we're going to be meeting in conjunction with Stone Lab, the Heidelberg folks, and other research think tanks to see what can be done and figure out where that intersection is of a free market economy and our ag community being able to function as they normally do, but also the responsibility of government to provide clean drinking water for millions of Ohioans and those on other shores of our Great Lake. So very pleased with that effort. We have a long way to go, but I just wanted you to know how important I view water quality for Northeast Ohio and for all of Ohio. In terms of the dredged materials, there are, in addition to the phosphorus, in fact, some of our members of the ag community joke that the best farmland in Ohio is at the bottom of the lake. It's filled with nutrients. But there are PCBs in it, there's mercury in it, and this is why that research is important, so we can pull out those harmful chemicals and use what's left, whatever that may be, in a different fashion. So we're keenly aware of that and would not wish to pass that along, if you will, in the form of a product that is unsafe. The second question that you asked has to do with tariffs and the beans, soybeans, and how that may impact our farmers in the 99th. I've spoken with a number of farmers. They are concerned about it because the beans are growing in the field. It's going to be harvest season before you know it. There's a great deal of uncertainty as to what's going to happen between trade relations with the U.S. and Canada, the U.S. and China. And we do export a lot of beans. And there's something that is also interesting. There have been some different crops planted, and I don't know if it was anticipation of this or in terms of promoting agricultural diversity, more diversity in our district. We've got more peas, and I know that they're being used for dog food over in Meadville with what used to be Dad's, and I forget their name now, but it's going to the dog food industry. There's been an increased amount of wheat grown, and part of that's due to the lower cost of soybean. And there's some other, I mean, there's some that are toying with hops and barley and that sort of thing with Ohio's growing craft brew industry. And quite frankly, I think it's healthy to have more diversification of agriculture so that given the vagaries of agriculture, weather and market values and that we have a more solid base from which to deal with those challenges to it. So a lot to be seen from the federal level, how that will trickle down to the 99th District, but I know that my people are keenly aware of that and concerned about what the future might bring. As many of you know, for 6 years now I've labored with respect to school funding and weaning us off our overdependency on property taxes and making sure that the state pays its fair share of the fee for educating students, quite frankly. Last fall, in a bipartisan effort, Representative Bob Cupp from Western Ohio and I teamed together to take a deep dive into school funding. We invited superintendents, treasurers from around the state, other interested parties, and indeed from Toledo to Athens County, from Ashtabula to Cincinnati, we've had folks all around the state commit to some of them meeting twice a month, giving up time during their busy work weeks to come to Columbus for a subgroup meeting and then for the overall work group meeting. There are 8 different subgroups. Education funding is so complex. We've broken it up into the different components. Transportation is one. What's the cost of transporting a typical kid in a typical town to school and back? What's the cost of gifted education? What is the cost of those students for special needs? What would a distribution formula look like? What is career tech costs? What is the base costs of a student? Point of the matter is, all of those factors have been broken down into 8 subcommittees, and they've been co-chaired by various superintendents and treasurers from around the state. And out of the 16 co-chairs, 3 of them are from the 99th District. So I think we were very well represented on this committee, work group. After all these months, we started last November, we are now in the final stages of those groups subgroups rendering their their final recommendations. Now keep in mind, these are recommendations from practitioners in the field. We will be compiling these in the next 2.5, 3 weeks, all the subgroup reports, posting them in an executive summary, and then Representative Cupp and I have agreed that we would address both chambers in terms of the leadership, House, caucus, minority and majority, Senate, minority and majority. In addition to that, both gubernatorial candidates and their staffs, we're going to, if they'll have both of us, we will be there arm in arm to promote this, because school funding is beyond typical partisan politics, as it should be. These are all of our kids that we share, and we have to get this right. Beyond that, some of the interest groups that have expressed deep concern with our work in a positive way, the Ohio Education Association, the Ohio Federation of Teachers, the Business Roundtable, the Chamber of Commerce, groups such as that, OASBO, BASA, Buckeye Area, school superintendents and such, all kinds of groups. Bottom line is that we will share this work with all so that we can have an intelligent, spirited discussion, hopefully arrive at an agreed plan, and knowing that it is going to take a while to implement. This has to be phased in. These cuts were so deep to public education that we're not going to rebound overnight. But if we can agree that we have a goal, and we can agree that we're going to work towards that goal in a timely and conscientious fashion, that's the best way we can climb this mountain, one step at a time. So this fall, late this summer yet, this fall, you can watch for this report to be rolled out and to be shared with all members of society who have a keen interest, so we can have that dialogue. And I can tell you, as one who has, for 2 sessions now, been a part of the primary secondary subcommittee on finance dealing with these matters, typically we will spend, there's 5 of us in the subcommittee, we will spend the time between late January and early April dealing with these issues. But it's only 5 people, and we're only getting input that is from those who volunteer, and it's not always from practitioners. So to have this kind of widespread input without respect to finance at this point, what is the ultimate model? Where should we be? And don't worry about costs at this time. That's something we have to come back to. We understand it, and that's why it's going to need to be phased in. Figure out what the model is, and then we need to have those difficult conversations to figure out how we're going to pay for it, and what can we afford, and what is beyond our means. We don't know yet. But the bottom line is, a number of us who are absolutely serious about moving forward on a school funding reform plan, and that's why we've involved the leadership of both houses and the gubernatorial candidates. Now, here's why this is important to you. If Ohio really wants to be a part, an integral part of manufacturing, of job creation in the future, we have to have an educated workforce. Another effort I'm working on right now, and I found this absolutely horrifying. We have a population of 11.5 million people. And between the ages of 18 to 64, the working age population, we have over 700,000 people without a high school diploma or its equivalent. You cannot run a 21st century economy on a workforce that is undereducated. Not that education is everything. There's practical hands-on education that can be learned. I understand that. But there's a baseline that must be reached. And so it is my hope that as we look at learning and education, not only are we concerned K-12, but we're also concerned about bringing these folks back to a place, those who don't have a degree right now, high school diploma or its equivalency, back to a place where they can pick that up. Heard a story, and and there are a number of them, but just last week of a young girl in the early 90s that got pregnant in high school. To her credit, she doubled down in her courses her junior and senior year. She took two classes of English her senior year just to make up everything. She was well on her way, and it was discovered 2 weeks before graduation that she was short a quarter credit for phys ed. Missed it somehow. That was in the 90s. She never returned. Well, thankfully, within the last 3 years, she did get into a career tech center, and here's the beauty. She completed that within 6 weeks' time, and the increased wages amounted to $10,000 a year by simply having a high school diploma. My point is, there are others out there who for whatever reason, and let's be honest, some of us need more time to mature, to appreciate education, to understand where we want to be after we know where we've been. We have to make sure the door is open to bring those folks into the mainstream, get their diplomas, so that they can be productive members of society. So all of this work in education is laying the groundwork for Ohio to reinvent itself. When you think back to the days when there was a John Rockefeller in Ohio, a Firestone in Ohio, and Edison making trips through Ohio, and the other inventors that we had, and the Wright brothers were there. Ohio was a center of innovation and technology. We can return to that, in my view, and as a result, enter the 21st century workforce by being on the cutting edge. The days of the assembly line where people put widgets together by hand, those are done. And we have to address the fact that that's an antiquated economy. Business is always looking for more efficiency to drive down costs. Well, part of efficiency rests on technology and research and development. To get to that point, we need a body of research and development type folks here in Ohio to bring forth those changes that we need to increase our base industries. And I'll give you some examples here. Northeast Ohio, we are ripe healthcare related. We are the center of the world's healthcare industry with UH hospitals, with the Cleveland Clinic Foundation, and then of course in Pittsburgh, UPMC. Northwest Ohio, food technology, processing, packaging, logistics. Southeast Ohio, think about energy and the work that Ohio University is doing with respect to energy research, renewable, sustainable, natural gas, that sort of thing. And in Southwest Ohio, aviation, right? Patterson Air Force Base employs more people as one single employer than anybody else in the state of Ohio. Think of the drone research that can be done in a positive fashion now, mind you, but the research in aviation and the technologies that are involved there. My point is, we have the organic base structure to attract and retain additional industries with a focus on the 21st century economy, but we also have to have the workforce for them to stay here, remain here, and to grow their base here. And that's what I'm working on. There's been some discussion as well when we're looking at education funding about charter schools, online schools. And the superintendents and treasurers have recommended a separate line item in the budget form. And I've had this discussion. There has been a long-term debate about school choice. And we understand the fact that parents might choose to send their students elsewhere or educate them at home, and I get that. But here's my point. If we are going to have choice, and if we are going to decide that we would fund them separately, then they must be held accountable to the same standards as public schools. If it's public dollars, it has to have the same public scrutiny. We cannot continue to have our public schools act as a pass-through entity for charter schools. I had a conversation recently that the state has never, and this is true, in the Finance Committee, never appropriated money for charter schools. It's always been to the public schools as a pass-through entity. That must stop. If we're going to have choice, and we agree that we're going to have choice, there also must be accountability, to be fair to all, because we know the horror stories of what's happened to ECOT, the millions and millions of money that they have stolen from taxpayers. The lack of accountability, their unwillingness to cooperate, to do what's right for the people. Meanwhile, kids are getting hurt, the taxpayers are getting ripped off. It must stop. And there can be no compromise on that accountability if indeed we're going to have a quality education for every kid in Ohio, and if we're going to hold all of us accountable for doing just that. And locally, we have a challenge with the Happy Hearts and the DD Board and the Education Service Center. I'd like to point out that the Education Service Center is having an open house. If this is aired, I believe it's this coming Thursday night for anybody to see. I had a conversation with a staff member just over the weekend about the transition from the old building on Route 84 to the new building in Thomas Jefferson, more centrally located, and perhaps, and we'll see after the transition, much more able to serve a broader spectrum of the population. Anytime there's transition like this, and my heart is very heavy with respect to students who have been going to Happy Hearts and the change factor. We as human beings struggle with change, and I know there's going to be a lot of change coming forward, but the ESC and our public schools are committed, and they are not only committed morally, they're committed by law to provide an education for all students. And for efficiency, to get the most out of our taxpayer dollars, a centralized location is best. And so the ESC has taken it upon its shoulders, its responsibility, to purchase and renovate and administrate a centralized facilities for those students at the old Thomas Jefferson building in Ashtabula. So point is, those children are going to be served this fall. Have to be patient as we get through the transition. Transportation, education, it's all going to happen. Now the real question is, moving forward, financing. The ESC, the Education Service Center, is going to put a levy on the ballot. They're going to need additional funds, as did Happy Hearts and Ashcraft. They had an issue on the ballot last year. And it takes money to do this, but they're going to have an issue on the ballot this fall to help offset some of the costs. They get aid from the state, and it's adequate. It's not really adequate. It's some to cover, but there's far greater needs. Just transportation alone. This is a large county. So we're going to have to think as a society and ruminate on our commitment to these kids, the most vulnerable in our midst. Meanwhile, DD has also an obligation in the future for the workforce development piece, Ashcraft, but that's going to be privatized. The state law, federal law is moving them in that direction, and as such, their funding is going to be challenged as well. So they, in their wisdom, are maybe placing, they have a renewal on the ballot, the county commissioners agreed to that. Do they need extra money though? And that's the real question. I would ask that all of us think about this, ruminate on it, and get in touch with members of the DD board, get in touch with the Education Service Center and their board, attend meetings so we can collectively figure this one out. I know there is tension. We all know there's tension between the ESC and the DD board, and I get that because they both care about these kids. And anytime two groups care about kids, and then when we get down to the funding of those issues, there is going to be tension. But as adults, I really feel that we can work through this, knowing that the kids are the most important in the final analysis element in this equation to be dealt with. So all of us need to be involved, all of us need to be aware, and the solution lies within all of us as well. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this past weekend in the sales tax holiday. I saw the commercials from it from Columbus when I was down there last week and the week before and the week before that. But around here, the advertising about the sales tax holiday. And it was my privilege to, again, be a joint sponsor and then ultimately the main sponsor on the House version of the Senate bill that was passed to make this not only a one-time occurrence, but then it was renewed several years hence, and then just recently made into a permanent fixture for our people. It helps our working families. It slices off some of the, when you need it most. I mean, when you think about the cost of clothes and notebooks and all the school supplies, any way we can help you is a benefit, because that all comes at one time, just before the kids don't stop growing in the summer. As a parent, I can remember going back and thinking, how did our sons grow this much in such a short period of time? You're talking shoes, shirts, pants, it just happens. In addition to that, the sales tax holiday has been very good to the Ohio economy. It's another time within the year, think of Black Friday, that we purposely set aside time to do our shopping. And the retail merchants have really enjoyed this. It's created jobs. It's stimulated our economy to the point where there are more businesses able to see positive signs going into the end of the year. Some of them historically have struggled until Black Friday to make ends meet. But here's the real beauty. More people have been enticed to stay home and shop. Now, we know in Northeast Ohio that typically, if you were looking at school clothes, you'd head to Erie, or you might go to the Grove City Outlet Mall to avoid, quite frankly, the tax on clothing. But without that, we can spend our money right here in Ohio's borders. Our brick and mortar stores benefit well, and we just keep that money recycling right here in the state. I also, on a similar note, with great pleasure, was interested in the Supreme Court decision, which recently will require states and vendors from out of state to be picking up the sales tax on the internet sales. We've lost billions of dollars as a result, and it's hurt our local brick and mortar. I know many of us have shopped online, and up to now, collecting that tax has been difficult. It has put Amazon and other like them on an uneven footing with our local stores who do pay that sales tax receipts. It helps pave our roads, plow our streets, water lines, educate our kids, that sort of thing. So with that Supreme Court decision, making the playing field level again, I'm really looking forward to a more robust quarter, and as time goes on, more robust activities from Ohio's retailers. But very proud to help our working parents, help our state, and the end result was a very successful sales tax holiday weekend.